Hey friends, welcome back to Guess What? Compliance Can Be Simple. I'm your host, Dr. Natasha Guess, and today's episode is one I think every healthcare leader needs at least once a year. Because we are going to slow HIPAA down and talk about what it actually requires. And just as importantly, we will talk about what it does not. But before we get started, a quick note. This episode is for education and compliance awareness, not legal advice. HIPAA has developed a reputation for being overwhelming, intimidating, and unforgiving. Many teams that I know operate under the assumption that one mistake equals massive fines or immediate enforcement. That assumption creates fear-based compliance, which is not what HIPAA was designed to do. HIPAA is a framework. It is not a perfection standard. It was designed to protect patient information through reasonable safeguards that fit the size, complexity, and resources of an organization or practice. But when we misunderstand HIPAA, we either overbuild systems we cannot maintain or avoid addressing risk altogether. And neither of these approaches work. So today, my goal is to bring HIPAA back into focus as a practical, operational framework that can actually support your team. Now, at a high level, HIPAA requires covered entities and business associates to implement three categories of safeguards: administrative, physical, and technical. Administrative safeguards include policies and procedures, training, and oversight. This means someone must be responsible for compliance, even if compliance is only part of their role. It also means conducting a risk analysis and responding to identified risk from that assessment. For example, a small practice does not need a full compliance department, but it does need someone who knows where patient information lives, who has access to it, and how issues are escalated. Physical safeguards relate to the physical protection of patient information. This includes things like locked offices, controlled access to areas where records are stored, and making sure that your screens are not visible to unauthorized individuals. You can think about it as a practical example might be ensuring that front desk screens are positioned away from patient view, or that any paper records are stored securely after hours. Now, technical safeguards, these involve access controls, unique user IDs, passwords, and system protections for your practice. HIPAA does not mandate specific software. It requires reasonable controls based on risk. For instance, shared logins always create risk because access cannot be tracked. Unique logins support accountability and incident response. Now, what does HIPAA not require? I will tell you. HIPAA does not require you being perfect. It does not require zero errors. It does not require organizations or practices to eliminate all risk. HIPAA also does not require fear-based management or constant monitoring of your staff. In fact, if you're constantly monitoring your staff, that fear often discourages your staff members from reporting issues, which increases risk. HIPAA allows flexibility. What is reasonable for a solo provider will look different from what is reasonable for a multi-site organization. Additionally, documentation of decision making matters more than expensive tools. Oftentimes, I've heard a common misconception that HIPAA requires encryption in every situation. In reality, HIPAA allows alternative safeguards if encryption is not reasonable, as long as the decision to not encrypt is documented. Another issue that I see often is that HIPAA is misunderstood, and that creates risk. When HIPAA is misunderstood, teams tend to swing to the extremes. Some overcomplicate compliance by implementing systems they cannot sustain. Others assume HIPAA is too complex and then avoid engaging with it at all. Both of these leads to gaps. For example, your team might purchase an advanced compliance platform, but fail to train staff on how to use it. On paper, compliance looks very strong, but in practice, your workflow will break down. Another example is assuming that having policies alone is enough. Policies must reflect how work actually happens. If an auditor walks into your practice and interviews multiple staff members, that auditor can quickly find when there are gaps, when your policies do not reflect what your staff actually does. And that is not somewhere that your practice would like to be, or somewhere where your practice should be in an audit. Now, here is your mini audit moment for this week. I want you to take the time and ask yourself or ask your team members. You can have a quick 5 minutes meeting with your team and ask them these questions. Do we know where all patient information is stored? Does everyone have access to it? Is it role-based? And do we know what steps to take if something goes wrong? For example, if there is a breach, do we know how to report it? Do we know what measures to take to stop that breach immediately? These are all things that you should be asking yourself. And if the answer is unclear, that does not mean you are non-compliant. It means you have identified your next priority. HIPAA is not meant to intimidate healthcare teams. It is meant to guide them. When approached thoughtfully, HIPAA can support trust, it can support consistency, and it definitely supports patient protection. After listening to this and asking yourself those questions in the mini audit moment, if you're still feeling unsure where your organization stands, start with a simple review. Or reach out for support from a compliance professional who understands your practice model. This is very important, and oftentimes it is not done accurately, or it is done out of fear. I hope this episode clears up what HIPAA is and what HIPAA is not. And I hope that it helps your team going forward. I hope that it helps your team structure how you do trainings, policies, and procedures, and how you handle situations in real life. Thank you so much for joining me on another episode of Guess What? Compliance Can Be Simple. This week, as you work through your process and you look at your patients, keep it simple, stay compliant, and protect your patients.